You're listening to the Sketchnote Army Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey, are you looking for the ideal sketchbook for your sketchnoting practice? The Sketchnote Idea Book is the sketchbook designed for sketchnoters. Equipped with no bleed, no show-through paper, you can take almost any marker or pen you can throw at it. Get 10% off with code ARMY at airship.store. Hey everyone, it's great to have you, and I've got Eric Bakey on the line. Eric, it's so good to have you. Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller, so I'm really excited.
And I'm excited to have you. We've had a little chat just before the end of the year, and immediately thought that you'd be great for the podcast to kind of share your story and your perspective. So let's get that started. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
As it has evolved, I guess I'm an entrepreneur. If I'm at the bar, I just tell someone I doodle for dollars. That gets a rise out of most people. But in a very real sense, I try to solve business blind spots. And I think that feels right when I say it. I've had to go through a few different iterations of how you show up as an illustrator, which is not quite that, not quite a cartoonist, not quite a whiteboard wizard or whatever else you want to call yourself. But that one fits right now. Yeah. Nice.
And let's jump right into your origin story. I know a little bit about it, but I want to sort of let you take your time and tell us. Like maybe start from when you were a kid. Like, did you draw when you were a little kid, and did that maintain itself through your life, or did it come later in life? Like, how did all that work out, and to get to the place where you are now?
Yeah, I was drawn to the arts, and I drew cartoons when I was a kid, and I actually won some scholastic awards in high school to go to art school, but I was too much of a tough guy. I wanted to, I don't know, just wasn't prepared to go take my art seriously. And so I joined the Army right after high school and got to do the tough guy thing, learned to blow stuff up, and more importantly, build bridges. And so when I got out, I pun intended, I came up in the elevator industry, and I went from stacking steel and spinning wrenches as an elevator apprentice and worked my way up to become a general superintendent and construction executive. And really it was the application of visual thinking that really helped me exceed in these kinds of things. I mean, it's I brushed over about 12 years worth of my life there in a couple sentences, but really it was trying to understand the complexities of what an owner's intention was, what an architect's plan for making the thing beautiful, how an engineer makes the thing actually work, and then getting 80 different contractors to get on the same exact page and try to put the job in on time. I just used the tools that were available to me, which were a Sharpie and a cardboard box, and just kind of willed this thing into existence by getting everybody literally on the same page, because everyone has their own competing priorities when it comes to a project. And I used what tools were available, and it happened to be this thing called visual thinking. You know, in hindsight, I wish I would have put a little bit more attention to that ability when I was going into my day job. It probably would have saved me a lot of stress, but yeah, that's kind of the origin story.
Wow. So here's an interesting question, because you came up from the bottom being an apprentice and seeing everything from that perspective. You think that helped you when you came to the point of being this, I guess, a facilitator, I guess would probably be the right way to call it, right? You're a facilitator using visual tools to try to get everybody organized and on the same page. Some ways like a project manager, I guess you might even say. Do you think like coming up from the bottom and sort of working up that way gave you good perspective for all those other roles? Because you would have had to understand all those roles to really make them, almost like interpret one to the other, right? Like the architect to the engineer, because they might talk past each other. Is that a fair way to guess how that might have been?
Absolutely. And it was through hard work and going from not knowing anything about anything and just struggling at every phase going up. I hated it at the time. Like I hated my job at every phase of that experience, because there's always problems. But but it was just a commitment to craftsmanship, and then ultimately that won the respect of the guys when I'm in charge. Like, we all made fun of the guys who came straight out of college and started telling these mechanics, 55-year-old mechanics, how to build an elevator. Like, they don't even know what to do anything. And the same thing, like when I actually got into the on the office side of things, being able to speak from the perspective of the guys, but in a more elevated business like fashion, and being able to just the proper frame based on true experience rather than hypothetical book knowledge. I mean, it's just like street smarts versus taking a class. And fortunately, I've been able to do both, and it was just a commitment to craftsmanship and treating cartooning as an honest trade. That's really how I came to this, and leaning into it to say, okay, I'm not where I want to be yet. Now that I've transitioned into this visual thinking world, I want to go there, but I'm not there yet. So what can I do now with the skills and abilities, resources I've got to be a good steward of these resources and solve the problems that are around me with these things, to get me to where I'm trying to go in that general direction of what I think visual thinking should be. So yeah.
So another interesting question, because you came from this perspective, you obviously had the respect of the guys who did the work. How did management react to you when you came to them? Do you think you had were you sort of like this in between mediator that could sort of speak the talk and yet speak their talk as well? It's
hard to be a legend in your own land. So fortunately, I got recruited from from the field. When I went to the office, I went to the competition. So I could not get to the office level from the field place I was at. I had to take the next step of the ladder in a different company so that they would appreciate my knowledge, because I was just the irreverent kid elevator mechanic at the one company that sure he does a good job, but he's an elevator mechanic. Those skills were celebrated by the competition, and it was the greatest. It was a big opportunity, and I wanted to overachieve and bring everything I could from the field, but then apply it in a new context in the office. So, and it was appreciated at the new company. So
interesting. So almost like the place where you sort of built, you got to a certain point where you sort of outgrew it, right? And the only way to make the next step would be to leave it behind, where nobody has any kind of preconceived ideas of who you are. So you could sort of start over again.
And maybe that was my own limited ability, but it's like the grass is always greener anyway. Like there's always ways, even now, that I wish I could have transitioned things a little bit smoother, but it's always been, all right, well, this is the new thing I'm doing. Like, I'm going here and I'm going to kick butt, and it is what it is. So yeah.
Interesting. And do you find that that's been the true for your process? So obviously you, in each one of these, you sort of had to like burn it down and start over again. Are you finding this is a trend in your life for you to make it to go to the next level? Has that been true for you?
As I become, I don't know whether it's wisdom or fatigue, I'm doing less burning of bridges or anything like that.
Yeah.
Distilling down what the truth and principles really are to get to where I'm trying to go has been more important. And I think I was driven a lot by ego in the beginning. I wanted to go be the tough guy Army guy. I wanted to go be this pipe swinging elevator guy. I wanted to go be the boss. And then as I started achieving these levels, I was essentially climbing ladders leaned up against the wrong building. I didn't think before actually building a career. And if I would have had some visual thinking skills to really plan this thing out a little bit better, especially as I get to mentor some people now as employees and whatnot. It's like when I see that kind of spark in somebody, instead of letting them go all these different directions, I try to channel it towards, hey, what are you really trying to accomplish? I see there's a whole lot of activity, but what are we really trying to accomplish here? And try to channel them towards the best direction, and just trying to be the kind of friend or leader that I wish I would have had as I was coming up. So
That's great. So what kind of work are you doing these days? Are you still in the construction business? Where are you working?
I'm I'm no longer in the construction world per se. I do a little bit of real estate development kind of work, which is similar but different. It's before the construction actually even happens, and
Yeah.
I would argue it's much more lucrative to stay on that side of things.
Yeah.
But I'm also I just got hired by Boeing, the big aerospace conglomerate, and I'm really excited about that opportunity. I was kind of the wild west of freelancing. Whoever would hire me as a visual facilitator, how you show up as a marketer or a sales strategist, or all kinds of different ways that you can use these skills. But I saw a real weakness that I had, that I want to solve bigger problems, and I want to be with a team executing upon worldwide. I just want to have a bigger impact with these things. I feel like I have these really cool skills that are Ferrari skills for a small little consulting gig. But I want to go bigger and deeper with these people, and it's hard to do that internally in a small business. So I figured I'd go jump in the deep ocean where I'd have a team, and ultimately also get mentoring from somebody I really respect. So
got it.
It's the same thing of the ego thing is starting to fall past. I wanted to be this irreverent entrepreneur, but what kind of problems do I really want to, like, I can have a much bigger impact over here, and I have these weaknesses that aren't going to be used against me. They're actually going to be strengthened by someone who I actually trust to help identify them. So yeah, I'm really excited about the big opportunity that I've got going on now.
So give me an example. Let's say you're working with now you're internally. So let's say you're at Boeing someplace, just make a theoretical situation. You've got a problem that you're facing. You got your team, you got all of Boeing or some section of Boeing. How would you approach that? What kind of stuff would you bring to the table, and how do you use visual thinking in that context?
It really is very important to understand the situation before you try to solve the problem. And so slowing down and asking the right questions. It's not about having the right answers. It's about asking questions and truly having a consultative Socratic approach of feeling where's the pain. Like, so it hurts on the left hand side of your body here. Is it in your arm, or is it more in your leg, or like, and, it hurts right there. Like right there. And really taking a frame of, okay, so how does that apply to visual thinking? Drawing it out, asking the questions, capturing the emotion. That's the power of studying cartooning. Those the extra squiggles that make a cartoon really pop, make it look like it's moving, can speak and tell a story that's more true to life than reality itself. And I love that ability, and I do it, and I show it to somebody, and it's like that. When I get that, like that, when I see the pain in their eyes and they can laugh about it, then I really truly understand, and then it gives me the right to then, hey, maybe could this possibly be a solution? And again, you get that work done up front before you start prescribing a solution. So really, it's understanding and doing it visually, so that I don't have to have all the answers. I have all these, like, I don't have an aerospace engineering degree, like, and so I'm going to go, and that was a big. They did a fantastic job of interviewing a whole lot of people, and I felt very unqualified, because I have no aerospace engineering background whatsoever, but I guess it was just in the way that I approached problem solving, and that's what I'm excited to work with their innovation team to do that, and really understand the kind of problems that a big multi-billion-dollar international company has, and solve them with some simple pictures. Sounds really exciting to me.
That sounds really cool. And so I've looked at some of your work and sort of talked to you a little bit. My impression is that the visualizations you do are a means to an end. Like, your goal is not to produce an image. The image is a step towards solving a problem. So it doesn't have to be beautiful. It could be, as you said, you drew it on cardboard with a Sharpie, right? Like, medium doesn't matter, like quality doesn't matter, as long as it's communicating those concepts, right? Talk a little bit about sort of your perspective on the actual work, and like how you use it, and at what point do you just not worry about it, like it just becomes a step along the way, or maybe it does become like a map of some kinds that maybe a team would follow over a long period of time.
So I'm very fortunate that I have put the work in to become a really good illustrator. I've been paid to illustrate. I can draw photorealistically. I can paint portraits. I can do this really cool thing, but so can everybody else, and they can actually do a lot better than me. So I'm like, what can I do to compete with these in this industry of these people? The talent level is just unbelievable what people are able to do. So I just chose to solve problems that were bigger than just pretty pictures.
Mm.
And so it in the beginning, I wanted to, and I didn't want to share things that weren't super pretty. Like it's that social media envy game of like who can get more status and likes and whatever. And I just started sharing stuff that I thought was meaningful for me. And I've been very grateful that it has resonated with some people, because I get people comment and message me very often about how can I do this for them and their organization. It was just me scratching my own itch. And the longer I took to make sure everything was picture perfect and drawn out just like perfectly, I got no different people either get it or they don't get it. And it just like why am I so worried about this? Nobody actually cares. Like no one cares at all. So it's like they only care about what you can do for them. And once I realized that, it's like, okay, well, so how do I get faster at this? And how do I solve, capture these and share these meaningful things that maybe I care about that I thought people would actually care about and they don't. So like, it's just been just creating as many, that parable of how, if you want to create the perfect pot, you don't spend 3 months making one pot, you spend the next 90 days making 90 pots. And so I'm just trying to crank out 90 pots and then eventually I'll get the perfect one. And then what, to what end? It's ultimately just trying to solve problems for organizations and people that I want to be around. So to what end? It's simply to have I call them visually valuable conversations. I want to have conversations with meaningful conversations with meaningful people. And so that's the end. And I happen to use analog tools, digital tools, all kinds of different tools. It's just medium. I could be a crayon or on butcher paper for all I care, as long as I get the kind of impact that I want out of it.
Yeah, and that it communicates, you're connecting your communication between whoever you're working with or the people that you're working with, so you get on the same page, right? That seems really important as well. So that's really fascinating, and I think that sort of covers a little bit of what you're doing. If you're just starting, you're probably not even sure what you're going to be up to at Boeing yet. That'll be real fun to kind of follow and check in with you in the future and see what you're up to. This episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast is brought to you by Concepts, a perfect tool for sketchnoting, available on iOS, Windows, and Android. Concepts' vector-based drawing feature gives you the power to adjust your drawings anytime you like. You can nudge the curve of a line, swap out one brush for another, or change the stroke thickness and color at any stage of your drawing, saving hours and hours of rework. Vectors provide clean, crisp, high-resolution output for your sketchnotes at any size you need, large or small. Never worry about fuzzy sketchnotes again. Concepts is a powerful, flexible tool that's ideal for sketchnoting. Search Concepts in your favorite app store to give it a try. I want to shift into the tools that you like. So you've talked a little bit about using crayons and butcher paper and Sharpies and cardboard. Like, if you do you have like a go-to set of tools like pens or notebooks or paper or some materials that you like that you kind of sort of typically will run with? And let's start with analog first and then shift to digital.
So as I said, I started with just a cardboard box and a Sharpie marker. And that's effective when you're just quick and dirty in the field trying to just get a point across, explain something complicated to someone who doesn't get it. That checks the box. When I went pro, about 2016, I started doing this full time, and I bought this fancy flip chart, all the Neulands and replaceable nibs. All I got, like, I love it, and they're super cool, and fountain pens and feud tips and like all kinds of really sweet stuff. And then I kind of let the tools get in the way of doing the real work. I spent all this time practicing my typography, and it was fun to take the courses. And there's fantastic. There's so much stuff to learn. There's so much to this stuff. Like I have a whole huge
books
of what I love. I'm a total nerd when it comes to visual thinking and tools and only having the best. But then I stopped being a little bit so precious about it once the pandemic happened. And I'm like, well, now it's like, I really need, what problem am I really trying to do? Like, I was so concerned about making sure it was pretty and messing around with like the right tools and everything. And it's great. Like, it's hard to do good work with crappy tools, but only a poor craftsman blames his tools.
Right.
So it's just like this dichotomy of like, do you have the things that, what can you use to get the job done, and what job is it that you're really trying to do? So when it comes down to it, like you can do this job with some post-it notes and a sketchbook or a whiteboard or whatever it is that you have around you. There are some really nice things. There are wonderful resources. But I really don't, I try not to to get too hung up in it, because I will nerd out on making like the 0.07 G2 is better than the 1.0, like, or vice versa. Like I can totally nerd out on it, but I try not, like, what am I really trying to accomplish here? So that'd be my only feedback, is don't let the tools get in the way of a good job.
So it does sound like, you probably appreciate, like, so my perspective is I like to have tools that I can go into any drugstore anywhere in the world and buy. Like if I can get used to using those tools, I know I've always got a backup, right? If mine blows up, I can go to the Walgreens or the corner drugstore in the UK or whatever and probably buy something that's, if it's not that thing, or it's pretty close, right? So sounds like Pilot G2 would be one of those things. Do you have any favorite notebooks? I mean, I only use 3M Post-it notes because the cheap ones tend to curl up and fall off the wall. So, that's that a little tip there, that in case you're going to use Post-it notes, get the good ones because it's worth the money.
I do not leave the house without a little pocket-sized back. It's in my back left pocket at all times, with a Sharpie with the fine tip and the regular tip on it, and a big, like a 0.9 millimeter like mechanical pencil.
Okay.
Because they don't break. That is I will never leave the house without it, because like you should always have your tools, like especially just there's always time, little 5-minute pockets time to practice, or the things that pop in your head, or whatever. But I love to just capture these little tiny things, and it's just something that it is impossible to forget for me when I write it down, which is why I started doing this anyway. And if I put the words with the visual, it will burn itself. It's like mental dynamite. It's like, it's in there for good if I take the time to draw it out, especially in an emotional moment. So I have it with me. I don't always pull it out every single day, but it's always there. And it's just like, these are my tools, and this is how I'm showing up. So those are analogs that I gotta have.
Nice. And then I assume like the little notebook that you keep in your pocket, set like a field note notebook or something like that.
It was a super cheap one. Like it was like you get them in packs of like 12. They're super cheap, and they're just plain, like there's no dots or anything on them.
Yeah.
And they're, again, just like an Amazon special. I've got super precious notebooks and like sketchbooks that I don't like. I don't want to screw them up with like whatever. But I bust them out for Inktober, and I'll really lean into it when I'm going to do it. But when I'm just for an everyday carry, it's better to have something that you don't mind messing up and just getting used rather than never using it. So yeah.
Now there is something to be said about like something that's so inexpensive that if it gets screwed up, I'll just recycle it and start a new one, right? Like it doesn't feel like you're hurting anything. Nothing precious has gone away. Yeah, it got all bent up or got a little burned in the fire or whatever. Like, take pictures of the important stuff and recycle it and move on to the next one, right? There's something really freeing about that, right? You're not so tied to having to have a special book or something like that. So that's really interesting. Yeah. What about digital tools?
You can run an entire business now with Google Docs. Like it's just unbelievable what is available for free to be able to do this. I've used Procreate to illustrate a couple books now. Love it. Concepts is really cool. I'm probably going to transition more to concepts because I'm running these much bigger projects and going to need that infinite canvas to be open at all times and continue. But when it comes to actually doing consulting work and kind of delivering these things, Notability is just unbelievable. Being able to have a really pretty PDF that's like uploaded into it, and then you can also draw on it, and it's unbelievable the tools that you can get for like $10.
Right, I know.
It's just mind-boggling. Because I'm not as seasoned as you are, but like I was not willing to pay like for Adobe Creative Suite back in the day. It was just not even an option. So I just got good at these inexpensive tools, and they're just unbelievable how good they really are. And the tools are smarter than me. So I'm just trying, like, I don't even use them for even a fraction of what their ability to do is. And I'm already just blown away by how useful they are.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. The quality of the tools that we have available to us for the price that they cost, like Procreate and Concepts, and even I use Paper by WeTransfer. Like that's $12 a year. Like that's a drop in the bucket. I get value out of that. Like within the first week that I use it, it's already paid for in my mind from the value it provides, right? And even some other tools that you can get are pretty reasonable as well. So I think that's good. It sort of democratizes accessibility to those tools where maybe in the past it was pretty limited, right? You had to really be in with the old Adobe suite, especially if you bought it, right? Couple $100, maybe $1,000 if you really needed lots of tools, and suddenly you better make use of it because it's a lot of money. So that's really fascinating. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your tools. Sounds like you're a pretty practical guy like me. Let's shift into tips now. So the way I frame this is, imagine there's somebody listening, their individual thinking, whatever that means to them, and they feel like they've reached a plateau for whatever reason. Maybe it's the beginning of the year. Maybe it's just, tired out of something. Just they need a little bit of inspiration. What would be 3 things you would give them? 3 tips you would tell them? It can be practical. It can be theoretical. Things that you might say to encourage them to begin again or start the climb.
I'd say first, what problem are you really trying to solve? Like you're hung up on this thing. Like you're trying, what are you really trying to solve? And who are you trying to solve it for? Are you trying to solve it for yourself? Because sketchnotes are a fantastic way to solve for yourself and also get some gratification and edification from other people who think your work is cool. And there's a whole community for people who just do sketchnotes, and that's an essential. As someone who's gone through several apprenticeships, and it's essential to get those basics down 100%. So if you're just, what are you trying to solve? If it's skills that you need to get, just do some sketchnotes, and it's for yourself. And if you're trying to solve for somebody else, okay, so is this a graphic recording kind of question? Is this a visual facilitation kind of question? And then what is the value of solving that problem? Like, is it for you, is it to just get past the mental block of that I'm not good enough to do this thing? Well, yes, you are. Like there are lots of, there's so many uses for visual thinking and how you can increase your skills and share them with somebody else and because the only way to get better at drawing is to push the ugliness out of your pencil on that piece of paper. Like there's no way, no matter how many books I read or courses I take, like I continue to learn and continue to get better. There's so people are so good at this stuff, and even after people like tell me that you're so talented, it's still, I'm never satisfied like with how much further I could push this. So the tip number 1 is like, what problem are you trying to solve? Is it for you or for someone else? And what is the value of solving that problem? So you get off your butt and actually solve it. Like you need consequences for it not being solved, or or a reward for solving it. So what is the problem? Who's it for? And what is the value of doing this work? And you need to get that clear before you're going to get past your funk. So that'd be my first tip. Second is, so where are you right now and where do you want to go? There's, as I said, if you want to build sketchnotes onto and become a professional with this thing, you can. There's also people who I would argue I'm a better illustrator or arguably they've got incredible businesses doing this thing. So it has very little to do with your physical skill set and more about who is the community that you're surrounding yourself with. If you're just trying to be just educate yourself on a specific topic, maybe you're struggling with math or physics or something like that, and you can use visual thinking and sketchnoting to solve for that. Or there's tons of business and personal development advice out there. There's tons of podcasts to distill it down. There's it's a whole problem in and of itself. There's this proliferation of advice out there.
Right.
It's too much of it. It's this massive fire hose, and people have made incredible Twitters and Instagram pages and make incredible illustrations and sketch notes of just distilling down all the stuff. And maybe you'll also see that some of it is bullcrap by drawing it out and seeing, wow, this actually doesn't, when I see it in front of me,
it makes sense.
It sounded really good, but so that would be, so where are you now and where do you want to go with this? Do you want to do this professionally? Me, I mean, I have now got hired by this incredible company that's an aerospace defense, company that's unbelievable. And I'm just someone who's like a reformed construction worker turned cartoonist. Like, it'd be really hard to even put your finger on exactly how I got here. It's not something that I intentionally woke up and said, I'm going to do this thing. It was something that pulled on, like, once I saw your work, I saw there's a whole community. How do I get better at this skill so that I can be undeniable that I can solve these problems and work for a company that is on a mission that I actually care about. Cool. And my third and final one would just be to be useful, resourceful, and worth knowing in your 5 Mile Famous world. Because like it's not about being the best artist or even being the best listener. It's not being about being the best. It's being useful with the talents that you've been given, the resources that you've got. Resourceful people use your resources and be useful to the people who are around you, and like being worth knowing. I feel is a higher calling than being well known. So that's really what I aspired to do. So I'm really I guess I'm giving myself my own advice here, but that's my third tip is
That's great. Those are 3 great tips. I love all 3. Thanks for sharing those with us. And we're right at the end of the podcast, if you can believe it. It just kind of flew by. It was so fun chatting with you. Tell us, what's the best place for people to find you if they want to connect, if they want to talk with you? Where would they go?
I post pretty regularly on both Instagram and LinkedIn, and they're under my name, Eric Bakey, Bakey. And I also have my own little website, ericbakey.com. I've got the whole online presence I'm not hard to find. If you just type me into Google, I'm sure you'll find me. Yep.
So does I hadn't thought about this until you said your name. Is there any kind of background in your family of being bakers? Is that in your history?
So funny thing on my mom's side, so not my dad's side, but the Bakey name, my mom's grandfather was a famous wedding cake baker in Philadelphia.
Really?
And I still get my mom, when my mom makes me a birthday cake with like she makes a wedding cake birthday cake for me.
Wow.
And I can't get it. I can't eat it at the store. I got to get my mom's fancy birthday cake stuff. I'm kind of spoiled, but yeah.
So there's baking in your history somewhere.
There is.
Interesting. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Well, Eric, this has been so much fun chatting with you and having you share your experience and your story. Thanks so much for being on the show, and thanks for the work that you're doing and how you're sharing and how you're being in the world. We so appreciate it.
I appreciate you. You're a huge inspiration. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Well, thank you. And for everyone listening to the show, it's another episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast. Till the next episode, we'll talk to you soon. The Sketchnote Army Podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohdesign Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of AMP Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.